Great. So welcome everyone. My name is Sandro Carnicelli. I am the editor of the World Leisure Journal, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone to this workshop today. As some of you may have noticed or known or followed, the editors of some of the leisure journals have been working together for maybe the last couple of years now, trying to share ideas and share problems and challenges and advance the field together and have a more cohesive work. So one of our initiatives is to host this workshop and welcome you all here. So I would like to introduce you to our speakers of today, which is Professor Rasul Mowatt, who must be somewhere hidden because I saw he was there. Are you there, Rasul?
I'm here.
You are there. Well done. Also, Professor Kate Dashper. Say hi, Kate.
Hi, everyone.
Professor Louise Mansfield.
Hi, everyone.
Professor Karl Spracklen.
Hello, everyone.
Karl. And also Professor Rebecca Genoe.
Hi, everyone.
Great. So as you can see, we are the editors of some of our leisure journals, and the idea of today is talking to you and discussing some ideas about writing, reviewing, and editing regarding to leisure journals. So we have an agenda, just a little bit about us, a little bit of the types of articles and what makes a good publishable article. That will be led by Rasul. What makes a good review and what makes a good reviewer, that will be led by Rebecca. We'll discuss also special issues, and that would be led by Karl. And then finally, the roles in an editorial team that will be led by Kate and by Louise. As you know, many of our journals had associate editors, editorial board positions open recently. We had special issues open recently. We have changes in aims and scope, changes in journal styles and types of papers. So there's been lots of changes in recent years in in the leisure journals, and it would be nice to discuss some of them with you. I would also ask you to interact with us. So add on the chat questions, add where you're coming from, where you are just now. So it would be nice to see where you're based just now. So add the place, the country, the city in the chat, as well as any questions that you have to the panel. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have maybe 15 minutes to answer some of the questions that have been submitted before on the Google Forms that I sent, but also any questions that you place in the chat. So a little bit about us and what we've been doing. As I mentioned, we are a group of editors of leisure journals. Most of us, we are aligned to Taylor and Francis, apart from Karl and the International Journal of Sociology of Leisure. That is not a Taylor and Francis journal, but we've been working together and discussing ideas and discussing issues and problems and how to advance the field as well. We've also been keen to engage with other journals. So we've been inviting, for example, the Brazilian Journal of Leisure Studies to start to engage with us, and we are keen to expand that as well, engage with other journals in different parts of the world in order to challenge a little bit that kind of Eurocentric and Anglophonic approach to leisure research. It all started a little bit with camaraderie and sharing concerns and ideas at events, conferences, and projects. So, meeting each other at the World Leisure Congress last year in New Zealand, or at the Leisure Studies Association conference in Bournemouth, or here in Scotland, or TAU's events or CAU's events. So we end up meeting each other quite often during the year and sharing some of the problems that we have, some of the issues that we are having with the journals, but also ideas that could move things forward. So it's really nice to be able to support each other. So we have done lots of joint initiatives. One of the initial talking points for us was the struggle finding reviewers, and you may hear more about that later today. So one of the first things that we did was a form that many people responded, people who would like or were able to review for leisure journals but never done that before. So we've then collected about 150 new reviewers for papers, and that's been a great success, and it's a database that for the journals have been using to find reviewers when they struggle for papers. We also developed the Leisure Society podcast that some may have came across already. So we had already 2 seasons, and the 3rd season is coming to you on the 8th of January next year. So we are already recording some of the new episodes. So early next year, you'll be able to listen to the 3rd season of the Leisure Society podcast. But you can still listen to season 1 and season 2 on Spotify. We also done some joint talks and joint debates. For example, the Global Leisure Debate. We had one at the World Leisure Congress in Dunedin. We also had one here at the Leisure Studies Association conference here in Scotland. And again, we've been sharing some of the debates and some of joint talks talking about publishing in leisure studies. We also have done some collective engagement with publishers, so sharing, similar concerns. So we have most of us have the same contact point with Taylor and Francis, and being engaging with them in order to try to make publishing a little bit better for everyone. And as I said, sharing some good practices and challenges. This is a little bit of what we've been doing up to now, and I hope that you all who have engaged with leisure research at some point can see that there is a collective force trying to make publishing better, more interesting, progressive, and supporting the field in multiple ways. I come from Brazil, and I remember that I always felt that I'm muted now. I'm from Brazil, and as I said, the journal editor roles always seem so far away. Someone there, usually a white man, staying somewhere in the global north, is making decisions about my papers. And yes, I am a white man, but I hope that with these initiatives, we can show that editors of journals are approachable, and we can actually support each other and be progressive and deconstruct some of the ideas that a lot of people from the global south may have as well. So we're going to start today with Rasul, who will give us a little bit of a view on what makes a good paper. So Rasul, the floor is yours.
Such a big opening, and what I'll try to share are just some ideas, not necessarily something that is an absolute law, but just something to kind of get us going and thinking about it. And I think
Sorry, Rasul, you have to unmute yourself now because I muted everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had an early question, but I didn't quite catch that from the young researcher. So if they could probably repeat that, that would be fantastic, so that I can answer that question later on. But I think what's important for us to think about when we're trying to consider this discussion, this opening discussion of what makes a good paper, is thinking about ways in which some of us actually teach research courses, and what are the types of questions and things that we try to get our students to think about. Does it fill a gap? So no differently than in doing research, what makes a good paper is the product of the research that you may conduct. And so does it fill a gap? And when I say the gap, there's the gap of the expanse, the full expanse of the leisure literature through all the journals, all the textbooks, all that you could sort of get your hand on. I know that would be very difficult based upon some of the places that we're at around the world, access to certain sort of archives and so forth. But nonetheless, does it fill a gap based upon the body of knowledge that we have accessible? And I hope everybody sort of understands what I mean by gap. Gap meaning that there is a body of work that the field actually talks about, and there are subject matter and discussions that the field has not addressed yet or addressed deeply enough. So does it fill a gap? The second sort of question that I think some of us may pose in a research-based class, and also something that we would think about as, what makes a good paper? Does it expand existing knowledge? So filling a gap means that there is something missing, and does it expand existing knowledge is not necessarily filling a gap that's missing. It's sort of taking what's already there and maybe applying it in a completely new setting. Expanding on the ways in which, or the approaches in which it could, that study could be conducted, or that discussion could be taken, and the direction in which it could be taken. So does it expand existing knowledge? The third sort of thing for us to think about as a sort of discussion point is, does it introduce new types or approaches to research? Some of us as editors and leadership of journals, sometimes we see certain theories that just stay as the constant sort of thing that people pick up. And there are all of this other literature and all these other approaches that we either have dropped and have not picked up since the 80s or earlier. And there's other sort of approaches that from other fields that we just simply have not chosen to pick up. So does it introduce new types or approaches to research? The fourth question for us to think about is, does it introduce new subject matter to consider? So even in conducting a social behavioral science, there is a discussion section, there's a conclusion. Even there is a space for us to sort of take our results and apply it to some type of discussion that makes it, connected to other bodies of work. But even if we're not going to conduct social behavioral science research, and maybe some of our work is tied to cultural studies and other particular fields, anthropology, does it introduce new subject matter to consider? Whether it's about a certain body of work, populations that have not been sort of researched thoroughly. The next question, and there's just one more after this one, is, does it command a knowledge of existing literature? So does it command a knowledge of existing literature? And I'm only sort of mentioning this because some of us as editors have noted or talked about the ways in which papers have been submitted and they have not done the work of maybe reading the body of literature that's out there. And so they're thinking that they're submitting something that has not been discussed before. And so does it command a knowledge of existing literature, would showcase a knowledge of pre-existing work, making it then a good paper? And then the last is, based upon some of our more recent discussions, is it socially relevant? Does it speak to our times? Does it speak to the issues of our times? So thinking about those questions again, just really quick, does it fill a gap? Does it expand existing knowledge? Does it introduce new types or approaches to research? Does it introduce new subject matter to consider? Does it command a knowledge of existing literature? And is it socially relevant? Looking forward to a discussion.
Rasul, thank you so much for these key points. Actually, I'm going to go through there's a question just now in the chat I think would be relevant for you to answer now. It comes from Edisher and says, dear editors of Leisure, are you as obsessed with theoretical contribution as the rest of academia? And is the ultimate metric for a good paper, or what is the ultimate metric for a good paper in your eyes?
Shall I go?
I would not say, I would not say myself or anybody else, but I don't want to speak for anybody else. I'm not obsessed as a person, but hopefully no one else is. But when we say theoretical contribution, that's one particular sort of example of commanding a knowledge of the existing literature, or actually sort of expanding existing knowledge. So a theoretical contribution doesn't necessarily mean the actual employment of the theory in a study. It could mean just how we understand a particular theory. And so there's always importance of room for that. And at least for leisure sciences, what we have attempted to do is increase the body of work that's presenting theory, new theory, so that it could be a reference point for other readers who may want to use that theory in their future research. And is it an ultimate metric? No, that's not necessarily an ultimate metric. It's just one of the things that, at least for leisure sciences, but I know from some of our discussions, we have sort of talked about it. I think there's at least one or two responses. I see a couple hands.
Good. Louise, maybe you make a quick point and then we can maybe move on.
Yeah, I mean, I broadly agree with Rasul. I may actually be theory obsessed myself because I'm into theory. I'm interested in different theories and how they help you make sense of things. But I agree with Rasul. You don't have to pick a theory and put yourself in that camp and write a paper on that theory to make a good paper. I think the key thing is about an analytical depth. How are you making sense of the evidence that you've got or the point that you're making in enough analytical depth to be a high quality paper? I think that's the key thing. So it isn't about just picking individual theories and using them. You could be drawing from a great breadth of knowledge, as Rasul said, in order to make your case. It's about the depth and the quality of the analysis more than the single theory.
Great. So I can see Rasul will start to answer some of these questions on the chat as well. So maybe we move on to the next part, which what makes a good review and what makes a good reviewer, from Rebecca.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming today, and thanks for including me as part of this panel. So what makes a good review and a good reviewer? I think a good review is clear, thorough, detailed, specific, realistic, and on time. So we're looking for reviews that are detailed, like go through each section of a manuscript. What are your thoughts on the introduction, even the abstract, introduction, lit review, methods, findings, discussion? What are the strengths of each of those sections? So certainly focus on the benefit or the positive aspects of the paper and its potential contribution to the literature, as well as identifying some things that could be strengthened in the paper. So we know that no research is perfect and no paper is perfect. We want to see reviews that are realistic and that the authors will actually be able to address those comments. And then it's helpful to be as thorough as you can be with the first review. It can be frustrating when authors make all the revisions and then resubmit their article, and then they have a whole different set of revisions that are not related to the first set. So if you're thorough as possible in the first set, you're not asking for additional complex changes in the second round of revisions. It's also helpful to focus your comments on the paper rather than the author. So, for example, we might say, like, the paper can be strengthened by the inclusion of research questions rather than saying the authors have not provided clear research questions. Again, focus on how the paper can be improved and strengthened rather than what the weaknesses are. And then I think you can go to the next slide, Sandro. So this can be tricky, is how to actually respond to those comments from the authors. And we're all editors here, but we're all also authors. So we know that it can be challenging to deal with reviews, or respond to reviews, I should say. So the first thing I do as an author is I read the reviews and then I just take some time away from it. I try to absorb the comments and like maybe adjust to any emotions I have that result from those reviews before I start making the changes. When I have some time to think about it, then I can respond more appropriately. And then I also start with the easy things to fix. Like if I made referencing errors, then I fix those first, or spelling and grammar errors. Anything small and quick, I will do that first to get my head back into this particular paper, because it's been off my plate for several months now and I have to get back into the swing of this topic. And then I do the more challenging ones later. When you start to make your revisions, it's helpful to decide on a format for your response to reviewers. And often people will create a table with the comments in one column and your response in the other column. And this is really useful for organizing your own thoughts and your own, you're keeping track of your responses yourself, as well as it's helpful for the reviewers to very quickly see what changes you have made. Provide a thorough and detailed response when describing the changes, again, so the reviewers can see the change quickly. There may be comments that you disagree with or changes that you're not able to make. And when that happens, you should still respond to those comments and provide a rationale for your decision not to make the change. And just be polite and respectful in tone. Remember to thank the reviewers for their comments and let them know that their comments did help you to improve the paper. And finally, sometimes we do get submissions where the authors forget to highlight the changes in the manuscript, which makes it really difficult for the reviewers to quickly and easily see the changes. We kind of want the second review to go a little bit more quickly, so the easier you can make it for the reviewers, the better for sure. I think that's it. If there's any questions there.
Great, Rebecca. There is a question here. What if there are methodological flaws that make it challenging to assess the findings and conclusion until revisions have been made? How, as a reviewer, can you provide enough guidance to move the manuscript forward while being realistic about needing certain sections clarified before assessing subsequent sections?
Mm-hmm. That's a challenging question. Thank you for that. I think that I'm trying to think of reviews I've done where there have been methodological flaws. And it is very difficult then to determine if the findings and conclusion are appropriate if the research hasn't been clearly described. So I guess at that point you might question whether it's suitable for publication. You might consider what your recommendation might be. And often there's several choices between major revision, revise, and resubmit and reject. But I think asking for more detail on the methodology is important. So ask the authors to explain their methodology and their methods in more detail with appropriate references. And then if you think that the paper can be improved, then perhaps they need to do some reanalysis there, and you can include that as a comment as well. Does anyone else have comments on that?
Anyone else wants to comment on that? I think there's a follow-up question here. What would be a methodological flaw? So I think just responding to that, for example, if there are issues in terms of how the data was analyzed or the justification for both, the number of interviews or the number of questionnaires or the types of statistical tests that has been used. So it can be multiple types of methodological issues, really, that we can see sometimes in papers. And I agree with you. I think there's two things. One is if there are clear methodological flaws, is that a paper that should be accepted and should be moved forward or not? Because you would probably asking people to collect more data or expand that. So that may be coming a point where maybe that should be a reject, and then the person can work on that with the feedback and then submit to a different journal as well. But Louise.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think we do tend to see that papers that are flawed methodologically are flawed elsewhere. It's not necessarily a single point of failure in a method that is producing a rejection. It comes back to Rasul's point about, what do we ask ourselves when we're thinking about what good research looks like, and what does a good research design look like, and where are we positioning this work in a wider body of literature, and what contribution are we making? Often those bits are missing or lacking from papers, as well as the methodological flaws. So we tend to see those limits in the round, I would say. But I agree with Rebecca. There's a need. We don't need to justify qualitative research, and we're not all doing qual research, I know, but we don't. Qual research is interesting here. You don't need to justify the qualitative research. I think we've won that battle, but I think we're sometimes not very good at really giving the details of how we've produced the knowledge. And that doesn't help the analysis. So it's often all the way through the paper where we see the weaknesses.
Great. I'm gonna just move forward to Karl now, just because I think that can be a link here with some of the special issues. So, for example, World Leisure Journal has a special issue now on visual methods. But Karl, I would like to bring you now to talk a little bit about the role of special issues in journals.
Okay, can you all hear me now?
Yeah,
Yep.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Right, special issues. What is the point of a special issue? Well, a special issue is how the purpose is promoting our subject field. So it's about promoting leisure studies, sociology of leisure, leisure management, leisure sciences, social psychology of leisure, all those subject fields that we can call leisure studies. Special issues are also there to promote the journals. We've all got our own journals with our own calls going out at the moment, and essentially what we're trying to do with special issues is we're trying to kind of promote the journals. We're trying to find reviewers. We're trying to find future editors, people who will kind of stay on the editorial boards. So each journal has a different process for these journals. You can create your own CFP if you've got a great, fantastic idea that you want to add to sociology of leisure or leisure studies. Each of us as editors would be kind of interested in kind of hearing from you. So special issues are an important place for emerging scholars to get their research published. You need to see what we are offering and if your work fits. And if you start out as an emerging scholar, as reviewing a submission for a special issue, you might end up being offered more kind of opportunities to review papers. If you publish a paper in one of our journals, one of our special issues, again, it just means we are not kind of, it's because it's all kind of double blind process. You know, we don't actually know who you are, but it just helps you, helps us, I guess, get a sense of the kind of emerging scholars in our fields and the kind of people we want to see in the next kind of 10 to 20 years becoming grizzly kind of editors in chief like me. And that's it. Any questions?
Great, thanks a lot, Karl. And I've edited a special issue for your journal as well, and edited issues for leisure studies. Now there is a question about the importance of those special issues as a place to kind of start with early career researchers, a good place to find your niche research there, because there is a view that the process is a bit less competitive, but at the end it goes through the same double review. But do you think that guest editors or special issue editors, do you think they are more careful in curating and providing feedback and providing that supporting environment for early career researchers?
Yeah, I think so. I think guest editors of special issues, they have a responsibility to look after the people who've submitted work into those papers, into those special issues. And of course, there are going to be people who, whatever we do, won't be published in a special issue. But you know, we try and look after those people. We try and find other ways, other places in which those authors might be published. I've never, as a special issue editor, I've never ever had anyone who submitted a paper that was kind of so awful that it just couldn't be published anywhere else. It's just sometimes it just doesn't fit the actual call for papers and the kind of aims of the journal.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to move on. I think there's a couple of questions still on the chat. We're going to be answering them as well. I'll just move now to Louise and to Kate. Have you lost Kate?
Will I go
no,
first?
Am
I first, Kate?
You are, yeah.
I am, and I'm going to talk about the role of the editor-in-chief or the managing editor. These roles are differently labelled, but I think I've got two key roles for the managing editor. Often there's more than one managing editor. So this is the person or the people who I would say manage the process overall for the journal. They don't do all the work, but they manage the process overall for the journal. And I think there are two core kind of things we need to think about in being one of these, managing editor or editor-in-chief, with a number of elements within them. I think the first core aspect of the work is around what I would call stewardship. It really is about ensuring the journal is in good shape and that it is following the path, the strategic path that you intended it to do. And that is really key. And there are two aspects to that stewardship. One is ensuring quality of what is published. And this comes right back to Rasul's point around filling the gap. I'd call that originality, making sure everything is in the paper, from the methodology through to the analytical aspect of it, is rigorous, which reflects Rebecca's point. And ensuring that the work that's published is significant, that it is important and worthwhile, that it's not just repeating stuff we know before, that it really is moving the field on. So I think stewardship and quality go hand in hand. But I also think stewardship and strategy are really important. You know, it's one of the reasons why we've got together in the way that we have done, as Sandro beautifully articulated. We want to ensure that all of our journals are producing high quality research and that the field itself is therefore buoyant and sustainable for the future beyond the work that we do and for other people coming in and taking over. And I think it therefore becomes not just about managing and ensuring the quality within your journal. It's about developing your journal in the context of others in the field. And within that, some journals, well, actually most journals, I think, are probably connected to a society and an organisation of members within that field. And so we have a job to do in ensuring that there's a place and a space that is inclusive and high quality for people to publish in. So that's the more kind of overview strategic element of and the stewardship in the roles. I think then there's the obvious management roles. There is some stuff to do. I manage a managing editor of Annals of Leisure Research with Belinda Wheaton. I'm in the UK and she's over in Waikato in New Zealand. The journal is connected to Annals, so to that a membership body, and we do work weekly on the journal and sometimes daily, depending on what is going on. So you do have to either have the time or make the time to do the work, and it needs to be regular. And I say that knowing that I've got a whole host of things getting to their due date or slightly past their due date in terms of the work that I've got to do. But you actually do have to manage the journal and the rotation, the role and the processes of the papers coming in using an online system. I think we all use Scholar One. So you have to check the papers, you have to desk reject any that needs desk rejecting, you have to pass them on to people to review. That might include special issue editors, as Karl was talking about. You will be involved in reviewing the processes, the status of the journal, the progress of it, and reporting to that at meetings, probably connected to the organisation with which the journal is located. I still do reviews it's finding the time to do them is not always easy, but I still do reviews, and I still do reviews for other journals as well, in my field. And I think the other thing that we are all engaged in is training other people, developing people, whether that's early career or not, but supporting people to either take over the roles from us in due course or to come on board. So training is a key part of what we do as well. I think that's it.
I think that feeds on nicely then to the role of the associate editors. So I think these are roles which I think are becoming increasingly important, because I think it's fair to say for all the leisure journals, we are seeing a big increase in submissions of papers. So the workload in terms of just managing the journals is getting bigger. And so this is one place where I think the associate editor role is becoming so important. So associate editors are there to really support the managing editors in the processes of managing the workload, really, I'd say was the biggest role for associate editors. So although journals do this differently, I think in general, the associate editors help support in terms of things like finding reviewers for papers, managing that review process, but they may not be responsible for the ultimate decision about whether to reject or accept a paper. So an associate editor role is a really valuable learning role. And I think as editors, managing editors, so I'm one of 4 managing editors at Leisure Studies, and I think we see the associate editor role as people to mentor, to potentially be the pipeline to take over from us and or either at Leisure Studies or another journal as well. And so there's a lot of learning, hopefully, involved in the associate editor role. As I say, journals will do it differently, but it's a good way to start to understand that review process from the other side, because I know as an author it can often feel like it's almost a little unfair, or we're waiting a very long time for our reviews, and it can be very frustrating. But once we start to see things from the editor side, whether that's as an associate editor or a special issue editor or something like that, we can start to see that these things just do take a very long time to make sure that we get the appropriate reviewers, the right number of reviewers, that we get the reviews submitted on time, that we can then collate those reviews, and if they are varying, perhaps make a decision about what the outcome and the response back to the author should be. So associate editors at Leisure Studies, we're just recruiting new associate editors. We've never had them before, so I'm very excited that we're going to have people there to help support the journal. And I know the other leisure journals as well really encourage people to want to get involved in this role. It's a really good learning role, and it's kind of the future, I think, for all of the journals. Please.
Yes, so the role of the editorial board, it's a really, really important role. And I think all of us try and ensure that there is a diverse group of people on the editorial board across all aspects of diversity, the academic life course, and across demographic characteristics and across regions around the world. Really, the editorial board should be supporting the processes of the journal in publishing high quality papers. So they should be reviewing. At Annals of Leisure Research, we do ask that people on the editorial board do 4 to 6 papers a year. I don't think that they probably do that many, but we do ask that as a kind of commitment. Or if they can't do a paper when they're asked, that they do some work around suggesting others, so that there's this sort of ongoing process and networking of supporting the review process. But equally, I think the editorial board are also involved in the stewardship of the journal. There are editorial board meetings that journals have in various ways. Sometimes they're online, sometimes they're face-to-face, sometimes they're a combination of the two things. And the review and report that the managing editors will have, and they will be working with the publishers on this, is shared with the editorial board for discussion and review and for decision making around strategic intentions and directions of the journal. So it's a really great way, I think, of coming into the work of a journal and understanding how it works, and also being involved in the decision-making process, but also the management process and the review process, because the editorial board does need to make that commitment to the work of reviewing. I think that's enough on that. Do you want to add, Kate?
Now I'll go on to book review editor then as the next role that we're going to briefly talk about. So this is quite an interesting role to have. One I did at Annals Leisure Research earlier in my career, and I think it's a good way to get into that editorial work as well if you're interested in going down that route. So the book review editor does what it says, really. They are in charge of book reviews, which I think are still a really important part of our field and help to kind of communicate some of that research that's out there beyond the journals back to readership of the journals. So a book review editor will usually be the one to commission a review on a book that has been published in our field. And the ways we do that vary. So sometimes authors might suggest to a book review editor that their book could be relevant for review, and then it's up to the book review editor to think, is this going to be relevant and interesting to the readership of our journal? And sometimes book review editors will look for specific books that they think should be reviewed and would be interested, and then may put a call out and ask for interested reviewers to review that book. And again, the book review editor then manages that whole process, usually through the ScholarOne system as well. So they will, a book review doesn't normally, I think, get peer reviewed in the same way as a journal article will. So the book review editor has the role of reviewing and assessing quality very often in terms of the book review before it goes through to publication. So I think it's an interesting role. I think it's a good way to gain some experience of doing kind of managing the review process, and also a good way to have a role within the journal in terms of setting that kind of agenda and that focus, because obviously the books we review and the books we kind of look at in our field hopefully help direct people to read them and help to kind of drive the field of leisure studies forward.
And a social media editor, I mean, I can't express how important social media is for promoting our journals. Everybody knows this. You need someone who, not me, but somebody who can really, really get to grips with social media, knows all about it and use it to best effect. It is about promoting the journal, but it's also about sharing knowledge. It's about also connecting and networking with people who might want to publish, review, etc., etc. And it enables also a kind of circular connection to the publisher, because all the publishers have social media for doing this. And so it's a really important source of networking, collaboration and promotion of the journal. And social media editors can promote your particular paper, as you can do. They can also promote special issues. Sometimes social media can be used for kind of hot topics of things on particular days where it's relevant to promote those. So it's a really, really important area of work. And that's it, I think.
Yes.
Excellent. So it's been great. So a lot of questions coming on the chat as well. I've been trying to answer some of them. There is a question about artificial intelligence there. I think Rasul and Karl mentioned that we are not using artificial intelligence for review process. I think I'm not sure if the question was more specific about using artificial intelligence to write the literature review of the paper, so summarizing. And I think there is a little bit more an understanding of how artificial intelligence may or can be used or cannot be used in the writing process, and is a challenge that we've been debating in terms of what are the tools that we can detect the use of artificial intelligence. We had cases recently of fake references and fake citations and things like that. So the publishers and the editors are aware of some of those practices, are tackling some of those practices, but it's also important for researchers to be responsible, because at the end is their name on a paper that if it comes later on the line to be discovered that is being used artificial intelligence or not being genuine, it will cause more damage than good. Any other points that you've been looking into the questions that you want to mention?
Yeah, Sandra, I think I want to just sort of raise a particular point. Again, I think it's about what you're actually studying. Again, taking some of us who who teach research-based classes, it's not about, we're not publishing papers on mixed methods. We're not publishing papers on big data analysis. We're not publishing papers on ethnography. We should be publishing papers on a particular subject matter or topic, and that drives the questions that you answer, that drives the methodologies you choose, that drives the methods that you're going to apply. And so I hope one of the takeaways that you sort of hear from us is you need to think about what you're contributing to the field in terms of what the field is talking about and what the field should be talking about. Based upon the subject matter, this is one of the points of why many of us have increased the number of special issue topics within our respective journals and have begun to collaborate with each other on special topics, is because subject matter is the body of knowledge that leisure as a field is supposed to be sort of studying. So again, we're not publishing papers on mixed methods. We're not publishing papers on big data analysis. We're not publishing papers on a specific thing. You need to actually use your topic and subject matter as the drive for not only selecting what type of research you're going to pursue, but also what you're going to publish on.
Kate.
I think one thing we haven't mentioned, which is the topic that comes up whenever we as editors get together, is the importance, and it sounds obvious, but the real importance that the paper is about leisure, okay, for our journals. And I think that is, for me, with leisure studies, one of the biggest reasons why I desk reject papers is because it isn't really about leisure. And that's not to say that we can't have papers about tourism or hospitality or other related fields, but there needs to be a contribution to or a focus on the leisure aspects of that as well. There are lots of tourism, hospitality journals, or sport, or whatever other related field we might want to focus on. And there is a relatively low number of leisure journals, something that Sandro pointed out the other day, which I thought was a good point. So we do want to make sure that leisure is at the centre of the papers that come out in the leisure journals.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. I think one of the key things that I'm not sure if you mentioned is before you submit the paper, look to the aims and scope of the journal. I think it's very important for you to align your paper to the aims and scope of the journal to make sure that it fits there. It also reduces the chance of desk rejection. I think we all receive papers that are not really, they don't belong to a leisure journal. So yeah, I think that was an important thing. I have a question that I was asked in another event I was doing this morning about writing style. There was that view that there was an academic writing style, but there is also a view that this traditional academic writing style is evolving and changing. What are your views on the academic writing style of papers? Who wants to start with that? I'll start with Rasul, just because Justin, who is your co-editor of Leisure Sciences, writes in a bit of a different style, so you can blame him.
Yeah, thanks. I think, I guess in response to that, I think one of the things that many of us here as editors have been pushing back on and have probably abandoned has been a few different things. One, the debate over qualitative and quantitative. You need to produce research. We don't really care anymore about preferencing one or the other. Do good research, submit it, put it under review. None of us are prefacing one or the other forms of inquiry. In addition to that, because we're also becoming far more open to a breadth of fields and disciplines, there are many different types of voices that are tied to academic voice. I think that used to be the term academic voice. And before, academic voice was really about sort of social behavioral science-based research, and there is a specific sort of way to articulate that type of research. But if you're pursuing or conducting research in anthropology or in history, there's a different type of way in which that work is being presented. If you're doing something with comparative literature through ways in which English-based research and other sort of languages, then there's a voice in relation to that. So At least for leisure sciences, there's not one academic voice. It needs to be clear in what you're presenting, and part of what is being clear is not just the grammar, but it's also where you're speaking from. What is the discipline field that you're speaking through that then makes sense as to why not only are you submitting it to this particular journal, but why you're approaching presenting what you've done in this particular way.
I agree. We all have our own preferred academic writing styles as scholars, and I wouldn't kind of expect anyone else submitting a paper to IGSL had to repeat my style, but academic writing, it's kind of evolving, and it's, for me, the best practice has to be: is it clear? Does it make sense? This is my own papers and any papers that come through IGSL. Is it kind of backed up by, that wider literature? We have to look at our papers and reference back to that long history, even if we do a challenging that.
Well, that's excellent. I think we have the last 5 minutes here. I hope this workshop was relevant to you all. You enjoyed. I think there is one thing that I would ask you all to do. It's just before we finish, I would like you to reflect on some of the debates you had today here, and if you can add on the chat a suggestion for our next workshop, because I like to make our editors working more and more. They don't do enough. So I'm gonna make them organize another workshop. But yeah, so if you think that any of these topics is an area that you would like us to explore further and have a more dedicated session, I would ask you all to add that to the chat so we can consider. Our idea is to probably host more events next year. As I said, we have the Leisure Society podcast season 3 coming up in January, and just to show that we are here to support the field. And I hope that you feel that with the session today, our editors are all very approachable, and we are here to support you, support your research, and support the field as well. Any final words from our panel? Great. So it's almost 5 o'clock in UK. I would like to say thank you to everyone. I hope you enjoyed. We have recorded this session. We'll be sharing on our social media, on our LinkedIn's and so on. And I hope you all enjoyed. And thank you, Rasul. Thank you, Kate, Rebecca, Carl, and Louise for the partnership, the friendship. It's been great working with you this year. Yeah, I see you next time.
Will you share the